Hello and welcome to the Irish Aesthete. Previously, I was telling you about a trip the Earl and Countess of Portarlington made in 1785 from their home in County Laois to Ardfert, County Kerry. As I mentioned, this was a substantial journey of at least 150 miles on poor roads, so it took several days. Having stayed with Lord and Lady Glandore in Ardfert, the couple then undertook an equally long journey going back across the country, but this time heading southeast to County Waterford. There they went to stay in a house perched high above the Blackwater called Dromana, today still home after more than 800 years to descendants of the Fitzgeralds who first settled here in the early 13th century. At the time, it was occupied by George, 2nd Earl Grandison, seen here dressed as a macaroni in a contemporary caricature. Lord Grandison did not enjoy a very good reputation. Like many of his contemporaries, he was overly fond of gambling. It's said that the 6th Earl of Barrymore, while staying at Dromana, played so long and lost so heavily at cards that he retired to his room and shot himself. He was aged just 27. Lord Grandison didn't take his own life, but he did allow expenditure to exceed income, and this explains why an elaborate building scheme that he embarked upon at Dromana was never completed by the time of his death in 1800. Early in 1785, Caroline Portarlington had informed her sister Louisa that Lord Grandison is building a fine house at Dromana and is living in a great style. He pays his cook 100 a year. We are to pay him a visit too to see his house. And in October 1785, she and her husband did just that. From Dromana, Caroline wrote to her sister, "When we arrived at Lord Grandison's, we found the house full of company, he entertaining everybody with the utmost good humour, and she, that is, Lady Grandison, appearing quite a cipher. I was quite confounded at first, finding such a number of people, and she so silent and reserved. However, it soon wore off, and he informed me Lady Grandison's health had been so bad for a 12-month past that she was obliged to claim the privilege of an invalid and only appear to the company when her spirits could bear it." It appears that Lady Grandison, the former Lady Gertrude Seymour Conway, daughter of the first Marquess of Hertford, spent a lot of time in her room. She would die in Switzerland in 1793, aged 42. "You may be sure," Caroline wrote to her sister, "I begged not to be any restraint upon Lady Grandison, and so she followed her usual custom of remaining in her room till dinner, which made it quite like a bachelor's house. Since Lady Grandison did appear in the evening, every other night," wrote Caroline, "we had a dance, there being a sufficient number of us to make a very good set. Lady Grandison is very fond of dancing, but does not dare do it except now and then, as she burst a blood vessel about a year ago." Caroline liked Dromana enormously. Lord Grandison's is a most charming place, the house standing quite upon a perpendicular rock covered with wood, and a fine navigable river running constantly by, near enough to speak to the people on board. He is building a very large addition to his house, a farmyard, stables, lodges, etc., making roads and laying out the place, all going on it at once, and seems really very clever. I should never have guessed he would have retired to the country and attended to everything as he seems to do, but he is vastly fond of the place, and says he shall live there a great deal, but loves a great deal of company. However, eventually the time arrived for the Portarlingtons to leave, and they duly moved a little further north, but not very far this time. They went to Curraghmore, also a house that for more than 800 years has remained in the same family's hands. Curraghmore was originally a medieval tower house, but had been vastly expanded and encased within other buildings by successive generations. When the Portarlingtons arrived to stay there, it was home to George de la Poer Beresford, 1st Marquess of Waterford, and his wife Elizabeth Monk. Unfortunately, Caroline doesn't appear to have particularly enjoyed her time with the Waterfords. While acknowledging that Curraghmore was a fine and noble house, she found that there everything was in great order and form, and therefore not near so pleasant. Lady Waterford she thought very stiff and reserved, and he is a little in the vieille coeur style, so that our last week which we spent there was rather a drag, as it happened not to be very good weather. A shame indeed, because Curraghmore is a splendid house with all sorts of fascinating features, and its principal rooms had just been made over by, once again, the architect James Wyatt. But none of this caught Caroline's attention sufficiently for her to write about it to her sister, and so, alas, we don't know what she thought of the place itself. As soon as they respectively could make the departure, the Portarlingtons left Curraghmore and duly returned home. And there we'll leave them for the time being, on their journey further north to County Laois. But there's a great deal more to say on the subject, so perhaps we might return to it on a future occasion. For the time being, thank you so much for watching the Irish Aesthete. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.